Crimson light bled across 17 sectors of the holographic star map, each pulsing beacon a testament to failure. Each dying signal another wound in the fabric of galactic order. Commander Lyra stood before the tactical display like a statue carved from starlight itself. Her luminescent silver skin reflecting the harsh emergency illumination that bathed the Langmore Command Center in shadows and desperate hope. The gentle hum of quantum processors filled the air, a technological lullaby that had once brought comfort, but now seemed to mock her with its serene efficiency. Another patrol vanished. The silence that followed was absolute, devastating in its finality. 3 centuries of Altarian military supremacy, reduced to watching dots disappear from a map like dying stars in an accelerating universe. Asher entered the command center with the quiet confidence of someone who had walked through fire and emerged scarred but unbroken. The human moved with an economy of motion that spoke of countless battles fought in the shadows between systems, where honor was a luxury and survival demanded improvisation. His presence filled the vast chamber with something the Altarians had forgotten they needed, the dangerous promise of unpredictability. Lyra turned to face him, her violet eyes reflecting depths of tactical tradition that stretched back through millennia of conquest and glory. She was tall even by Altarian standards, nearly 7 feet of elegant power wrapped in the immaculate uniform of her rank. Every decoration told a story of victory, achieved through superior technology and unshakable discipline. Every crease in her uniform spoke of a perfection that had become their weakness. The human was smaller, more compact, built for adaptability rather than intimidation. His dark hair bore the regulation cut of military service, but his uniform showed the telltale modifications of someone who had learned that survival mattered more than appearance. When their eyes met across the command center, Lyra felt something shift in the carefully ordered universe of her understanding. "Commander." His voice carried the rough texture of someone who had shouted orders over the thunder of artillery. "I received your transmission, Asher." She gestured toward the tactical display with movements that were precise, controlled, betraying none of the turmoil that churned beneath her composed exterior. "We have lost 12 patrols in 6 days. The insurgents strike without warning, then vanish before our response teams can engage. Our formations cannot adapt quickly enough to counter their tactics." The admission tasted like defeat on her tongue. 300 years of Altarian dominance, crumbling beneath the weight of an enemy that refused to fight with honor. Asher studied the holographic battlefield with the intense focus of a predator analyzing prey. The red zones pulsed like infected wounds across 3 star systems, each one marking another failure of doctrine that had once seemed as immutable as the laws of physics. His fingers moved across the control interface with casual familiarity, manipulating the display to reveal patterns that had remained invisible to Altarian eyes. "They're not fighting your formations," he said, his voice cutting through her thoughts like a blade through silk. "They're fighting your predictability." The words hit her with the force of revelation and accusation combined. Lyra had spent her life perfecting the art of mathematical warfare, learning to execute maneuvers that were beautiful in their precision and devastating in their effectiveness. The idea that such perfection could be turned against them challenged everything she had been taught to believe about the nature of military supremacy. "What do you suggest?" The question escaped before she could stop it, carrying with it the weight of centuries of pride being sacrificed on the altar of necessity. "That you learn to fight dirty." The suggestion hung in the air between them like a challenge, like an invitation to step beyond the boundaries of everything she had been taught to value. Asher moved closer to the tactical display, close enough that she could smell the faint trace of ozone that clung to his uniform, the scent of someone who had stood too close to weapons fire and lived to tell about it. "Show me," she said, the words emerging as both command and plea. The next hour transformed her understanding of warfare as completely as if he had rewritten the fundamental laws of physics. Asher dissected their tactical patterns with ruthless efficiency, revealing how every strength had become a weakness, how every tradition had become a trap. His hands moved across the controls with practiced ease, highlighting patrol routes that followed geometric perfection, response patterns that could be predicted to the minute, communication protocols that announced their intentions to anyone capable of listening. "Your enemy knows you better than you know yourself," he explained, his voice taking on the tone of someone sharing dangerous secrets. "Every time you respond with overwhelming force, they're already gone. Every time you try to establish control, they've already moved to exploit the gap you've created. They're not trying to defeat your military. They're trying to make you defeat yourself." Lyra watched the patterns emerge on the display, seeing her own tactical genius turned into a weapon against her. The beauty of Altarian military doctrine lay in its predictability, its mathematical certainty that any given situation would produce the optimal response. But predictability was a blade that cut both ways, and their enemies had learned to wield it with devastating effect. How do we counter this psychological warfare? The question emerged as a whisper, carrying with it the admission that everything she had believed about the nature of conflict was incomplete. We make them play our game instead of theirs. Asher's fingers danced across the interface, pulling up insurgent attack patterns that revealed their own hidden structure. The randomness was illusion, the chaos carefully orchestrated to exploit Altarian weaknesses. But chaos, like order, followed rules that could be learned and turned against their creators. First, we randomize everything: patrol routes, response times, communication frequencies. Make it impossible for them to predict your movements. That would reduce operational efficiency by 30%. The protest emerged automatically, trained into her by decades of optimization and refinement. It would reduce casualties by 90%. His eyes met hers, holding her gaze with an intensity that made her forget to breathe. "Which matters more, Commander, perfect efficiency or keeping your people alive?" The choice was no choice at all, but accepting it meant abandoning everything she had been taught about the nature of military excellence. Lyra found herself caught between the weight of tradition and the gravity of his conviction, pulled toward a future that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. "What else?" she asked, her voice steady despite the revolution taking place in her understanding. "We use their own tactics against them. Instead of responding to their attacks, we anticipate them. Instead of trying to catch them after they strike, we make them come to us." The concept was elegant in its simplicity, terrifying in its implications. Creating deliberate vulnerabilities, offering targets that were too tempting to resist, turning the entire battlefield into an elaborate trap. The methodology was sound, but it violated every principle of honorable warfare that had defined Altarian military culture. "You're asking me to deceive my own command structure," she said, the words carrying the weight of professional suicide and personal transformation. "I'm asking you to win." Asher stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his compact frame. "Honor means nothing if you're dead, Commander. And right now, your honor is getting your people killed." The truth of it cut through her objections like a plasma torch through steel. 12 patrols lost in 6 days. 12 units of trained Altarian personnel reduced to memory and regret, because their enemies had learned to exploit the very virtues that had once made them invincible. "Show me," she said again, but this time the words carried different weight. This time, they were an invitation to transformation. The next 18 hours redefined her understanding of what warfare could become. Asher orchestrated chaos with the precision of a master conductor, turning disorder into symphony and confusion into strategy. Patrol schedules became exercises in creative randomization. Supply convoys changed routes without notice, following patterns that existed only in the human's mind. Communication protocols shifted constantly, creating a fog of uncertainty that blinded their enemies as effectively as any technological countermeasure. Lyra found herself watching Asher work with a fascination that transcended professional interest. His tactical thinking operated on levels that Altarian doctrine had never explored, finding solutions in spaces that proper military education insisted were empty. Where she saw chaos and disorder, he perceived opportunity and advantage. Where she sought control and certainty, he embraced unpredictability as a weapon. The insurgents initially responded by increasing their aggression, believing that the apparent chaos signaled weakness and opportunity. They struck at targets that had been carefully prepared for their arrival, walked into ambushes that had been disguised as accidents, found themselves fighting shadows while the real battle took place in dimensions they couldn't perceive. "How did you know they would attack the communication relay?" Lyra asked, standing close enough to Asher that their shoulders almost touched as they watched the tactical display update with the results of their carefully orchestrated deception. "Because that's what I would have done." His smile was sharp as a blade, dangerous as radiation. "Cut communications, isolate the defenders, then pick them off one by one. Classic asymmetric warfare. The problem is, they're using tactics against people who have never learned to think like them." The admission sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the command center's climate control. Asher's tactical genius came from understanding the psychology of desperation, from thinking like someone who had been outgunned and outnumbered more times than he could count. His innovations emerged from necessity rather than theory, forged in the crucible of impossible situations, where creativity meant survival and convention meant death. "You think like them," she said, the observation carrying with it a mixture of admiration and concern. "I think like someone who's been where they are." His expression grew distant, shadows gathering in his eyes like storm clouds on a distant horizon. Sometimes the only way to win is to make the other side play your game instead of theirs. The psychological dimension was becoming clearer with each passing hour. Traditional Altarian tactics assumed that opponents would engage according to established protocols, that warfare was a contest between equals operating under mutually accepted rules. The insurgents' advantage came from their willingness to abandon those rules entirely, to fight from the shadows, while their enemies remained locked in patterns that had become predictable as planetary orbits. "They're trying to control the tempo of engagement," Lyra realized, the insight arriving with the sudden clarity of revelation. "Exactly. Every time you react to their attacks, they decide when and where the battle happens. We need to flip that dynamic." Asher's next stratagem was audacious beyond anything in Altarian military doctrine. Instead of hunting the insurgents directly, he began broadcasting false intelligence about critical vulnerabilities in their defensive network. The transmissions were carefully crafted to be intercepted, leading the insurgents to believe they had discovered weaknesses that could be exploited for decisive victory. "You're deliberately compromising our operational security," Lyra observed, watching the false intelligence propagate through communication channels that the insurgents had been monitoring for weeks. "I'm compromising operational security that doesn't exist." Asher's hands moved across the controls with the fluid grace of a musician performing a complex composition. "The targets they're going to attack exist only in these transmissions, but they don't know that." The deception worked with mathematical precision. Insurgent forces began concentrating around the phantom targets, abandoning their dispersed tactics in favor of coordinated strikes designed to exploit vulnerabilities that existed only in Asher's imagination. For the first time in weeks, they were behaving predictably, moving according to patterns that could be anticipated and countered. Lyra watched the tactical display transform as enemy forces shifted position, saw the dispersed threat condense into concentrated targets that Altarian firepower could address with devastating efficiency. The elegant trap was closing with the inexorable certainty of gravity, drawing their enemies into killing fields that had been prepared with mathematical precision. "Now," Asher said, his voice carrying the quiet intensity of controlled violence, "execute containment protocol." The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. Caught in the open and surrounded by superior firepower, the insurgents found themselves fighting the kind of conventional engagement where Altarian military doctrine excelled. The rebellion that had lasted months was effectively ended by a single coordinated strike. The scattered enemy forces either destroyed or captured with minimal friendly casualties. Lyra stared at the tactical display as the last enemy signatures disappeared, replaced by the steady green pulses that indicated successful mission completion. The insurgency that had defied 3 centuries of military tradition had been defeated by tactics that violated every principle of honorable warfare. "Your methods are effective," she said, the admission carrying with it a mixture of gratitude and unease. "They're effective because your enemies haven't learned to use them yet." Asher's expression grew serious, shadows gathering in his eyes like approaching storm fronts. "But they will, and when they do, you'll need to be ready with something new." The warning carried ominous implications for the future of galactic security. If unconventional warfare could defeat established military doctrines so easily, then the stability that Altarian supremacy provided might be more fragile than anyone had imagined. "What do you recommend for long-term strategic stability?" The question emerged as both professional inquiry and personal plea, carrying with it the weight of civilizations that depended on Altarian protection. "You need to learn to think like your enemies. Not just the honorable ones who follow the same rules you do, but the desperate ones. The ones who have nothing to lose and everything to gain." The suggestion challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of military excellence and galactic order. Accepting that chaos could be more effective than discipline, that desperation could triumph over technology, required a complete revision of everything she had been taught to believe about the nature of power and security. "That would mean changing everything about how we train our officers," she said, the words carrying the weight of institutional transformation that would ripple across generations. "It would mean surviving in a galaxy where not everyone plays by the same rules." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent transmission from Fleet Command, the communication arriving with the urgent priority that indicated high-level attention. The victory in Dunworth sector had attracted notice from the highest levels of Altarian government, drawing scrutiny that could prove as dangerous as any military threat. "Fleet Command is demanding a complete tactical analysis," Lyra said, reading the priority headers with growing unease. "They want to know how we achieved such rapid success against an enemy that had defeated conventional operations for months." "Tell them the truth." Asher's advice was simple, direct, and politically catastrophic. "You learn to fight the way humans do." The implications were staggering beyond calculation. Admitting that human tactical doctrine was superior to Altarian methods would undermine the entire foundation of galactic stability, calling into question the military supremacy that had maintained peace for 3 centuries. "There has to be another way to explain this victory," she said, searching for alternatives that would preserve institutional pride while acknowledging tactical innovation. "You could claim that you developed these tactics independently. Take credit for the innovation." The offer was tempting but ethically questionable, a solution that would preserve Altarian prestige at the cost of fundamental dishonesty. "I cannot claim credit for work I did not perform." The words emerged with the force of absolute conviction, carrying with them the weight of personal integrity that transcended political convenience. Then you'll have to explain why you needed human assistance to solve a problem that should have been within Altarian capabilities. The dilemma was impossible to resolve without consequences that would reverberate throughout the known galaxy. Either course of action would damage Altarian military prestige and potentially destabilize the political structure that had maintained galactic peace for generations. What would you do in my situation? The question emerged as both professional consultation and personal appeal, seeking wisdom from someone who had navigated impossible choices and survived to tell about them. I tell the truth and deal with the consequences. Lying about this will only make things worse when the truth inevitably emerges. The advice was sound, but difficult to accept, requiring a level of courage that transcended military valor and entered the realm of moral heroism. Admitting failure meant professional suicide and personal humiliation, but it also meant preserving the integrity that made victory meaningful. The tactical analysis took 14 hours to complete, every detail examined and verified, every assumption challenged and defended. The report was comprehensive, honest, and devastating in its implications for traditional military doctrine. Asher worked alongside her throughout the process, providing insights that no Altarian officer could have offered, sharing knowledge that represented decades of experience in unconventional warfare. Working so closely with him revealed dimensions of his character that went beyond tactical expertise. His understanding of organizational dynamics was sophisticated despite his apparent disregard for formal protocols. His willingness to share dangerous knowledge demonstrated a level of professional trust that transcended species barriers and political considerations. You could have kept this information to yourself, she observed during a brief pause in their analysis. Used it to maintain human tactical advantage over potential rivals. Information is only useful if it's applied correctly. His response carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. I'd rather have competent allies than confused enemies threatening galactic stability. The pragmatism was characteristically human, but the underlying cooperation suggested something deeper than mere political calculation. Asher was thinking beyond immediate tactical advantage to long-term strategic stability, considering consequences that extended far beyond the current crisis. Why did you agree to help us? The question emerged as a whisper, carrying with it personal curiosity that transcended professional necessity. Because the alternative was watching you lose people to an enemy that could have been defeated months ago. His eyes met hers across the tactical display, holding her gaze with an intensity that made her forget to breathe. That's not good for anyone who cares about galactic peace. The explanation was characteristically direct, but the emotion behind it suggested depths that conventional diplomacy could never explore. Asher's commitment to their cooperation went beyond political calculation, extending into territories that conventional military relationships rarely entered. Fleet Command accepted their tactical analysis with the kind of stunned silence that greeted paradigm shifts and revolutionary discoveries. The new protocols were implemented across all affected sectors within 72 hours, spreading throughout the Altarian military with the speed of wildfire and the inevitability of avalanche. They're implementing the new tactics faster than we expected, Lyra observed, watching deployment reports arrive from 17 different sectors. That's good, but it's only the beginning. Asher's warning proved prophetic within days. Success like this sends a message to every potential insurgent in the galaxy. They're going to start adapting these tactics before you can counter them. The tactical revolution spread exactly as he had predicted, unconventional warfare techniques appearing in systems that had been peaceful for decades. Traditional military doctrine was becoming obsolete across the galaxy, replaced by increasingly sophisticated forms of asymmetric conflict that challenged every assumption about the nature of organized violence. "We need to stay ahead of the evolution," Lyra said, watching new threats emerge on tactical displays across the known galaxy. "Continue developing new approaches before our enemies master the ones they've already learned. That means changing how your entire military thinks about warfare and conflict resolution." His question carried the weight of civilizational transformation. "Are you ready for that level of institutional change?" The question was more complex than it appeared, requiring not just tactical innovation, but complete cultural transformation. Implementing comprehensive military reform would require overturning centuries of tradition and challenging assumptions that had seemed as fundamental as the laws of physics. "I'm ready to do whatever is necessary to protect my people and maintain galactic stability," she said, the words carrying the weight of absolute commitment. "Even if it means working with humans on a permanent basis." The suggestion was both appealing and terrifying, offering unprecedented opportunities while challenging every assumption about Altarian independence and superiority. Permanent cooperation with human tactical experts would provide significant advantages, but it would also represent a fundamental shift in the balance of galactic power. "What kind of arrangement did you have in mind?" The question emerged as both professional inquiry and personal invitation, carrying with it implications that extended far beyond military cooperation. Joint tactical development, shared intelligence, coordinated training programs. His proposal was ambitious and unprecedented. Real partnership, not just emergency consultation when things go wrong. The concept was intriguing but politically explosive. No human had ever held permanent advisory status with Altarian military command, and the political implications would be staggering. Yet the alternative was continued vulnerability to enemies who had learned to exploit the very strengths that had once made them invincible. "That would require approval from the highest levels of government," she said, already calculating the political challenges that such a proposal would face. It would also require trust. His eyes searched hers, looking for something deeper than professional commitment. "Are you willing to trust humans with that level of access to your military capabilities?" The question cut to the heart of galactic politics and personal relationships. Altarian military superiority was maintained through technological and tactical secrecy that had been guarded for centuries. Sharing that information with humans would represent a fundamental shift in the balance of power that could destabilize the entire political structure of known space. "Are you willing to trust Altarians with that level of access to human tactical doctrine?" she countered, meeting his gaze with equal intensity. "Fair point. This would have to be a genuine partnership based on mutual trust and shared objectives." The concept was intriguing but unprecedented, requiring levels of interspecies cooperation that had never been attempted in galactic history. Creating truly integrated tactical development would require trust that transcended political boundaries and species barriers. "I'll need to present this proposal to Fleet Command," she said, already anticipating the political battles that lay ahead. "They'll want detailed projections and comprehensive risk assessments. I'll help with the analysis. This is too important to leave to political considerations and bureaucratic caution." The offer represented more than professional cooperation. Working together on such a proposal would require intimate collaboration on projects that would reshape the nature of galactic military relationships. The partnership would extend far beyond tactical development into territories that conventional diplomatic relationships rarely explored. The weeks that followed were intensive beyond anything in her previous experience. Developing comprehensive proposals for interspecies military cooperation required deep analysis of both tactical capabilities and political implications, balancing military necessity against diplomatic complexity. Asher proved to be as skilled at bureaucratic navigation as he was at tactical innovation. His understanding of organizational dynamics was sophisticated despite his apparent disregard for formal protocols, revealing depths of political awareness that complemented his military expertise. Working so closely with him revealed dimensions of his character that went far beyond professional competence. His commitment to their collaboration was absolute, his insights invaluable, his presence increasingly essential to her understanding of both military strategy and personal possibility. Their partnership was evolving beyond simple professional cooperation into something deeper and more significant. The intellectual stimulation of working with someone who approached problems from completely different angles was personally rewarding in ways that transcended military necessity. "You're enjoying this," he observed during a pause in their analysis, his voice carrying warmth that had nothing to do with tactical discussion. "The tactical development," she asked, though they both knew the question encompassed much more than military cooperation. "The collaboration, working with someone who thinks differently than you do, someone who challenges your assumptions and makes you see possibilities you never imagined." The observation was accurate but difficult to admit within the context of Altarian military culture. Personal relationships between officers were discouraged, particularly those that might compromise professional judgment or challenge institutional loyalty. "Your tactical thinking is unlike anything in our military doctrine," she said, choosing words that acknowledged the truth while maintaining professional distance. "It's intellectually stimulating to work with someone who approaches problems from completely different perspectives." Is that all it is? Intellectual stimulation. The question hung in the air between them like a challenge, like an invitation to step beyond the boundaries of professional relationship into territories that conventional military cooperation never explored. His eyes searched hers, looking for honesty that transcended diplomatic caution and institutional constraints. Before she could respond, Fleet Command's approval arrived with the urgent priority that indicated high-level attention and unprecedented decision-making. The Joint Tactical Development Program had been authorized at the highest levels of government, representing a fundamental shift in galactic military policy. "They approved it," she said, reading the authorization codes with amazement that such revolutionary change could happen so quickly. "That's good news. When do we start?" "We already have." Her smile carried the weight of personal and professional transformation. "This conversation is the beginning of a completely new approach to galactic military cooperation and interspecies partnership." The implications were staggering in their scope and significance. They were literally creating the future of galactic military relationships through their collaborative work, establishing precedents that would influence the nature of interspecies cooperation for generations to come. "Are you ready for that level of responsibility?" she asked, the question carrying personal as well as professional dimensions. "I'm ready to work with you on whatever challenges we face." His commitment was absolute, encompassing both tactical cooperation and personal partnership. That's what real partnerships are for. The words carried promise that extended far beyond military cooperation into territories that conventional relationships rarely explored. The future stretched ahead of them like an uncharted star field, filled with possibilities that could reshape not just military doctrine, but the very nature of galactic civilization. "Then let's get started," she said, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone ready to embrace transformation. "We have a galaxy to keep safe, and we're going to do it together." The war was over, but their real work was just beginning. The partnership between human tactical innovation and Altarian military excellence had already proven its effectiveness in battle. Now, they would have the opportunity to develop that cooperation into something that could maintain galactic peace and personal connection for generations to come. In the soft glow of the tactical displays, surrounded by the quiet hum of quantum processors and the vast silence of space beyond the command center's armored hull. They stood close enough to touch, close enough to imagine futures that transcended species barriers and political boundaries. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and filled with threats that would challenge everything they thought they knew about warfare and survival. But they would face those challenges together.